and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He's the author of the book The Unquiet Sea, no other than Mr. Frank Healy.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be here.
Welcome to Book 101, Mr. Frank, and can you please introduce more about yourself?
Okay, I'm Frank Healy. I am a licensed professional counselor, which is very similar to a psychologist. And I've written more than 20 books, mostly self help, on healing your past, improving your memory, because you may have heard of us. I have this special talent condition called hyperthymesia. I remember every day of my life since I was 6 years old, and I'm now 64. I remember the day of the week, the weather, personal events, and news events. And my book, The Unquiet Sea, is it's not a memoir. I wrote my memoir, Who Could Forget? But The Unquiet Sea is it's about a man with a memory like mine who counsels people from his beachfront house. And at age 50, he seems to have it all. He has yeah, he owns his beach house. We're a successful counseling practice, and he's engaged. Now he seems to have it all, but in 1 week in 2011, he stands to lose everything. He Hurricane Irene is threatening to demolish his house. He finds out a young female patient ex-patient who he can't figure out why, is suing him for inappropriately touching. And because of that, his fiance gets cold feet. And the novel is all about, so that's the tension part. And it's all about here. Well, it starts with his childhood, where he's put in a home where his parents divorce, and but then gets an adoptive family, and then it goes. So it's but the whole span of the book goes from 1966 to 2013, and everything in there as far as news events is historically accurate.
Mr. Frank Healy, thank you so much for sharing your books to the world. So, how did you portray the connection between past and the present to the book?
Well, I made a I made up the idea of I when I was when I was about eighth grade, I had a friend who lived in a nursing home nearby where we lived, and my father had spent a few years there when he was growing up. So I thought this would make an interesting story. He was traumatized as a kid, and develops this phenomenal memory, and it's the reader's guess as to whether or not there's a connection there between the two events. And and the present was I do live in the Jersey Shore area. I'm about 15 minutes offshore from south of Atlantic City, but north of Cape May, and a few miles offshore. But my mother-in-law has a house in the resort of Stone Harbor, so it was kind of made into a novel about you know a fictional past as well as a present, and different. I actually kind of incorporated my own personality into several of the characters. His 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 young patient, who it turns out a whole family fiasco why she accuses him, and has goes through a lot of frustration, and you know I I included a this it turns well, I don't want to tell too much of what's in the novel, but the past, the present. One thing about my hyperthymesia, which is more popularly known as superior autobiographical memory, these events pop into my head from the past, with as much clarity as if they were happening right now. So a lot of times it's like a quick time travel when I recall a memory.
So, Mr.
Yeah,
Frank,
someone could
Mr.
go
Frank,
ahead.
what is your struggles in writing this novel?
Well, it was a struggle because when all those memories popped up, the good ones as well as the bad ones, like some people think it'd be really neat to remember so much of your life, but the good, of course, like not only remembering my first kiss, but all my kisses, everything. So family vacations, vacations with friends, all kinds of good stuff. But I also remember romantic breakoffs, ups, bad days at jobs, and all the negative stuff. So the challenge was to turn this memory of mine from a combination of blessing and curse into just a blessing. So I got into psychology so I could learn how to at least let go of the feelings when the bad memories crop up,
Certainly.
but keep the feelings from the good memories. So.
So, Mr. Frank, how does the sea symbolize the character's emotions and memories?
Well, in a way, his the sea symbolized it because his mind was always unquiet. There was almost so much, always so much stuff going on in the protagonist George's in his mind. That and living at the shore and hurricanes and all. I mean, concretely, that was the unquiet sea, but symbolically, his mind was the unquiet sea.
So, what kind of emotions does the protagonist associated with these memories?
Well, to give an example, when he's ready to ask the lady out that becomes his fiance, he's going through a lot of fear of what if she says no, what could happen. So it takes him a couple days to actually call her, even though a lady that he had dated when he was younger, who ended up marrying someone else, arranges matches them together. But no, I was very nervous about that, and sometimes he relives the pain when his father visited him in the home and ends up saying he's going to move to Florida and he won't see him anymore. And so so he had to learn himself to with the bad memories when they come cropping up, how to deal with the emotions.
So, Mr. Frank, how does the protagonist's ability to recall every detail affect his relationships?
Well, it affects his relationships, and that anything that happens, he can just about anything he can relate to something that happened in a past relationship. For instance, he's had a few rejections, and when his fiancee Megan gets cold feet, he he's beginning to think, oh, she's gonna reject me too, and a lot of fear of being hurt came cropped up,
So,
and
what? Go ahead.
yeah, he ends up in a very scary scene, rescuing her from somebody, and that
So,
helps bring the. Go ahead.
what role do specific events in history play in the book?
Well, there was one day he's taking a friend of his with who is mentally challenged after a childhood trauma, which I described the trauma in the book. He's taking him to see a sheltered workshop after the guy graduates from high school, and they happen to hear on the news the date August 20th, 1986, when Patrick Sherrill killed a bunch of his coworkers in a post office and telling him good thing that's not you. And then 3 weeks later, the he his friends visiting him, and they watch the first episode of this brand new show on TV, Oprah Winfrey. So there's, and then he well, there's a lot of technicalities and complications with incorporating popular music into a novel, but Fourth of July weekend, 1966, when his dad's taking him home for just the weekend. I imagine that they're leaving the home to go home right at sunrise, and Red Rubber Ball by Circle, which was a top hit that week, was playing on the radio. And so a lot of so 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 it brings a lot of historical things is incorporated into the novel, what was happening on that day.
So, Mr. Frank, what kind of emotions does the protagonist associated with these memories?
Well, he remembers the good memories. I mean, he remembers memories that made him anxious, that made him sad. He remembers th- remembers even historical events and how they made him feel. So there's a lot of real yeah, a lot of anxiety, but and depression. But he also remembers the good memories, like his. It was the summer after when he was adopted. He was 11, and his adoptive parents, brought him to their beach house in 1971, which he ended up buying from them in 1999. But they could still come down, and so the good memories like that he remembers too. So, and he's a very emotional person who, no wonder he became a therapist. And and how it's all played out. Well, most of the novel is from his perspective, but there's small sections of the novel that go into the other characters' perspective. For instance, the client who is suing him, with that to a series of events, she doesn't even know she's suing him until the last minute. It's something her family tricked her into. And so, but most of it's from his, like, I tried to convey what it's like for a very emotional person with a very good memory to go through life.
So, Mr. Frank, how did you balance personal memories with broader themes of human experience?
With broader things, you mean?
Yes.
Okay, well, a lot of times, I mean, in one way, my special condition was useful. Anytime I was encountering a problem, I would quickly ask myself, have I ever encountered something like this before? And the older I got, the more the answer was yes to that. So I thought, well, I can handle this too. So I used my memory to build confidence, and and I learned to like, if I see somebody who looks a little scary, I quickly remind myself, okay, he just looks like somebody I knew when he was a kid, but he's not the same person. So I can just get to know him without making that association.
How does the book address the idea of nostalgia versus burden of the past?
Well, a lot of ways, he's yeah, the past is a burden, but he learns to deal with it by growing, and this is something that I even advise my own clients that I counsel, that you know you can you can use the past to learn. And I do these in some of my other books about healing your past. I have a self-help trilogy called Heal Your Memories, where I interviewed 12 to 15 people in each book, uh, who overcame some adversity, such as school or workplace bullying, a rape, a career sidelining injury. and growing up in a war zone and all different. But in order to be interviewed for that, the person had to be happy and thriving now. So they overcame it. And that's part of the book. And the other part of those books are meditation like exercises to help you let go of your own feelings from a bad memory.
Very well said, Mr. Frank. Very well said. So, what would be your advice for those people out there who want to write their own novel?
Well, I would say that read a lot so that you come up with your own inspirations and also notice like what movies and what TV shows are your favorites. So maybe right along that genre. For instance, if you like some of the detective shows, write write some mystery novels or or if you like horror, write like Stephen King and all, write some horror. So I'd say get the idea and then incorporate as much as you can into your own, from your own life into the novel. And well, of course, I would also advise people to be careful about if any. I mean, it's sort of a balancing act. If you're going to create a character that's based on someone you know in your life, consult them and see if it's okay, and let them read it. You know, like George's younger siblings from his adoptive family. I had my brother and sister read those sections. They were not completely, but kind of like them to see if they approved. And also, it's always good in the beginning of a novel to put, which many people do. This is an old trick, like any character representations. If any reader finds a character that seems to be like them, this is purely coincidence and not intentional.
Certainly. So, Mr. Frank, thank you for your advice. And what would be your short term and long term goals in writing?
Well, this year I'm trying to write at least six short reads. One is already out called Happy Every Day, and sometime this month I'm going to publish a book on Stoic philosophy. There's So I want to write long, and I also, when I retire, which will probably be in about 2.5 years, I want to probably create some courses too. And there's another book, Stress Free Success, which I'm thinking of for recommending to police and fire departments and maybe doctors and nurses, different of the more stressful occupations, ways to calm yourself down when you have a stressful occupation or when you're going after your goals, such as students, and how to. So that's what I hope to do, like expand on this when I retire, and probably even at that point, start my own podcast like you have.
Certainly. I encourage you to do it. And good luck to your goals, Mr. Frank. So, what lessons
Thank
can
you.
readers take from the protagonist's experience?
Well, I think they can take where it's okay to have a protagonist that resembles them or someone they know closely, as long as they get that person's permission. And the biggest thing I've learned, like when I was in my 20s, I read a lot, but I didn't write novels then because I had the naive assumption that characters are mostly just based on stereotypes. And I learned later on that nothing could be further than the truth with that. It's like characters have to be believable people that readers can relate to. Either relate like, hey, I went through the same thing, or and some characters might be people that you disliked, but they still evoke strong emotions in you. So, and a protagonist has to be someone who's interesting and complex enough so that the readers enjoy joining them in their adventures, getting inside their head, and experiencing the adventures they go through, along with the trials and tribulations.
So, Mr. Frank, what psychological aspects of memory are explored in the book?
Well, one thing, his friend Roger, I get into details about. He had a trauma when he was 6 years old and lost his parents in the 1972 flood of Hurricane Agnes. And, uh, and I detail in it how what went through his mind when he was scared almost to death, floating in water, and didn't know where his parents were, and then he didn't talk for a while, and never completely recovered normal speech, and so I tried to get into a very scary subject, trauma. Like if you weren't born with some mental retardation, trauma can do that to you, and
Certainly.
nothing. And but he's a good guy. You know, I didn't want to show any prejudices against any substratum of the population. And Roger's a good guy, and he's strong and a good swimmer. So George helps him get a job as a lifeguard for a few summers, and so he's so that's the aspect. And I tried to touch and also in the character of Marilyn, who is George's client, what it's like to be so frustrated and having an older sibling who seems so much more talented than you are, and how to discover your own, and her, along with another client, Dan, who had a childhood trauma. I get into the whole thing of why the events traumatize them and how George helps them and his interpretations of why they're the way they are now. So there's a lot of psychology in the novel.
So, how does the book compare to other works about memory and personal history?
Well, I would say, there's I mean, I guess I compare this kind of to some of David Baldacci's character of Amos Decker, who has a memory like mine. But in Baldacci's books, he that happened when he was playing football for the Cleveland Browns and had a head injury, and became that way through a head injury. And he has some psychological issues because of it. And I think it's that's what I mean. It's some ways that character plays out that way, and there's other psycho. So there's a lot of psychology in most of the characters too, and even the lawyer in the book. His father wants him to get help because he's counseling because he works so hard and is so stressed all the time. So so it plays a lot on that. And well, two authors from long ago that I always found fascinating: Joyce Carol Oates, who really gets into people with problems and how ignorant of the problems the people around them are, and and John Updike. Even though I always found him to be kind of cold in his writing, he gets into the idea of why some people when they grow up don't leave their town and don't advance in life the way some of their peers did, and what causes that. So, and it's the lovely troubled daughters of our old crowd, a short story he wrote, and so so I was fascinated by anything psychological in a novel.
So, Mr. Frank, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, Food 101, in its fifth season, People, fifth season with Chef Alessandro, one of the specialty chef in one of the five-star hotel in downtown Toronto. So please do listen to our latest episode. We are reading our letter senders all over the world. So please do listen. Food 101 wherever you listen your podcast. So, Mr. Frank, what is the overall message or takeaway from the unquiet sea?
Well, part of it's, I wouldn't say there's only one message. I'd say understanding people with hyperthymesia as well as understanding people who are mentally challenged because of trauma. And, to understand in an entertaining novel with tension to understand people whose minds are different from ours or typical things as well as to enjoy a good novel.
Certainly. Mr. Frank Healy, thank you so much for sharing your books to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support all your books?
Yes, you can go to my website, Healy's Healing, and some of them are listed there. And you can also go to my Amazon Central page or just put my name in, and they're all listed there. All my books, because there's a few different genres, and but they're so you. I've written enough variety, I think, so you can take your pick on what you'd like to read.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Frank Healy because if you support him, more and more and more empowering books to come. So, Mr. Frank, thank you for your time.
Yes, it was a pleasure.
More to come, people. See you soon. So, Mr. Frank, I'm gonna